Welcome everyone. I ask that we be upstanding for our opening prayer. Almighty God, we ask that you be present at this meeting to assist us in our service to the community through local government. We pray that our decisions will be wise and taken with goodwill and clear conscience. Amen. Councillor and officer presence at the meeting. We have all councillors in attendance. We might move to apologies and granting of leave. We have an apology from our CEO, Juliana Phelps. Someone like to move apologies? Councillor Scales and a seconder. Councillor Anderson. All in favour? Carried. Disclosures of conflict of interest. 0. Confirmation of minutes. The following meeting minutes are being presented to be confirmed. The ordinary council meeting held on the 28th of June 2023 and the special council meeting held on the 3rd of July 2023. Would someone like to move a motion on the minutes? Councillor Wortman.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that the confirmed minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 28th of June 2023 and the special council meeting held on the 3rd of July 2023.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Dickshay. All in favour? Carried. Petitions and joint letters, nil. Public question time. We have a couple of public question time questions. We have Miss Debbie Montany. The subject's removal of Lord's Hut and safety of alleyways. Question reads, why is this being mooted when no public discussion has occurred, or every time the public raises a suggestion that concerns public land, we are asked to wait under the public lands consultation is completed? Why aren't council waiting for the same consultation to be completed? If council has an issue with the Historical Society, what steps has council done to fix this? I know plenty of people who would like to help with the hut, and council knows my feelings on the hut, yet I've never been asked to contribute in any way. And question 2, what is council's view of the provision of lighting in the alleyways? It is very dark place at night, especially through winter. Can council please look at maybe footlights or sensor lights to provide safety to people and property but not impact on sleeping residents? So we've got some response to those questions, and council would welcome a revival of the Tlangit Historical Society and suggest that you approach them to talk through your concerns about the maintenance of Lord's Hut. The Historical Society has an agreement that they will do that. And I think the public land consultation refers to the work with CHC are doing for the town placemaking. As part of this process, extensive public consultation has been undertaken on a number of issues within Tlangita, including, and Amanda, you might be able to let us know there on what sort of stuff that has and whether it's had any impact on Lord's Hut or anything.
Through you, Mr Mayor.
Hang on.
Through you,
go.
Mr Mayor. Thank you. So at present, the consultants are still consolidating all of the feedback, but it certainly isn't showing up as a major theme at this stage. Feedback around Lord's Hut. So I guess from that process, we're not seeing it as a major priority to date.
Yep. And so just to add to that, you know, there's been no consultation with the public about moving Lord's Hut because council doesn't have a position that they in any means looking at moving Lord's Hut, so that's why there's been no public consultation. Question 2 with regards to the lighting. So there are a number of roads across the Shire towns that have little street lighting or no street lighting. Council's position is that public lighting is most useful in commercial areas where the public may circulate at night. This also reduces the impact on light pollution in residential areas. If there are areas, for example, laneways, where concerns are raised by the police around safety at night, then there are options for council to seek grant funding. However, it is highly competitive as well. So at this stage, we have a lot of areas that require more lighting. And I'll hand over to Rachel we've got another question as well.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we have another question from Tina Walton regarding the tree removal in Wheeler Street. So the question is, I ask Council urgently to put a hold on the removal of street trees in Wheeler Street, Corryong, to allow objective analysis of its tree planting strategy before it is too late. That strategy objective is to achieve 40% canopy coverage in urban streets by 2025. And these streets, albeit not without problems, the seed pods, although the native birds love them, already provide excellent and highly valued shade, and it is not clear that the proposed replacement trees would go anywhere near equalling the same. Removal and replacement of street trees in Donaldson and Jardine Streets several years ago has failed dismally in this regard. With the anticipated increase in heat, 2023 announced the hottest year thus far, and therefore urban heat banks. We need all the shade we can get. Council has steadily removed so many trees in Corryong over recent years and never had the shade or canopy cover been replaced. This must stop. This is urgent, as of course once the trees are destroyed the damage is done. The tree planting strategy and choice of replacement trees needs urgent review. It is not achieving its objectives and is environmentally unsound. Thank you. The response that we have in response to this one, the trees with regard to the trees in Wheeler Street, which have signs on them at the moment, I think there's 38 trees proposed for removal and replacement. So these trees have been inspected and a large proportion of them have got structural issues. They are showing signs of disease, and this is due to poor pruning by the electricity company because they're located under electricity lines. They're also causing damage to the curb and underground services, and they do drop bobbles that, seed pods that people trip over on. So we're proposing to remove these trees. The new trees have been purchased and will go in within 2 weeks after the existing trees are removed. They are proposed to be flowering plums and Japanese maples that take 4 to 5 years to establish and will be pruned and planted denser than the trees that are there already to establish a good canopy coverage that is lower and appropriate for under the power lines.
Thank you. I would add to that the trees that are there at the moment look very average. The way they get pruned, and you know they're not designed to be under power lines. And we go to item 8, informal meetings of councillors. Would someone like to move a motion? Councillor Wortman.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that the information be noted.
Thanks, Councillor Wortman. And a seconder? Councillor Scales. Anyone opposed? All in favour? Carried. Organisational improvement. Corporate and Organisational Development report. And I'll call on our Director of Corporate and Organisational Development.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, at Appendix 2 is the report. I'll take it as read. To summarise, the highlights during the last quarter was the completion of the 2021-22 financial statements and sign-off of the audit by VAGO, as well as the development and adoption of the budget for 23-24. So there were some really good wins. In terms of the challenges, we have some ongoing staff vacancies, particularly in our human resources area. However, there's been some fantastic contributions by other staff to help fill those gaps. The recommendation is that the report be noted.
Thank you. Any questions or clarification on that report? Councillor Wortman.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. In the report, I note the increase in FOI applications. And look, I think it's very important that the public and our ratepayers know that these applications for FOI do take up significant hours of staff time, and a lot of them are coming from an organisation called Council Watch, and we have attempted to organise a meeting, which I believe today we're going to have, to try and clarify where these FOIs are coming from, and just to explain our case that it does take up a lot in a small rural council. It takes up a lot of staff time, but it's just important that I think the public know that this is happening. Yeah.
Thank you. If there's no further questions or clarification, someone like to move the motion?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the report be noted.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. And a seconder? Councillor Dickshay. Councillor Anderson, would you like to speak to the report at all?
No, just agree with Councillor Wortman.
Councillor Dickshay. Anyone like to speak against or for the report? No? Well, anyone opposed? All in favour? Carried. Council plan priorities. Again, I'll call on our Director of Corporate and Organisational Development.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a standing quarterly report to provide an update on the progress of council plan priorities. So it is taken that the report has been read, and the recommendation is that the report be noted.
Thank you. Any questions or clarification on that report? No. Someone like to move the motion? Councillor Scales.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that the report be noted.
Thanks, Councillor Scales. A seconder? Councillor Anderson. Councillor Scales, would you like to speak to that at all?
Just very briefly, Mr. Mayor, it's fantastic to see all the green there, which means items are complete, and that there is no red, which is even more exciting, which means it's a high risk of not being delivered. So yeah, really great to see the progress. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Scales. Councillor Anderson.
No, thank you.
Anyone else like to speak to that report? Anyone opposed? All in favour? Carried. (9.3) Audit and Risk Committee appointment. So I might tackle that one, I think. Oh, yeah, okay. I'll pass over to our Director of Corporate and Organisational Development. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we have undertaken a recruitment process for 2 new members of our Audit and Risk Committee. So firstly, we'd like to thank the outgoing committee members for their contribution over the term, and the recruitment yielded some really strong candidates, and as a result of the interviews we've offered the positions to Loren Murray and Parag Shah. So the recommendation is for the appointment so the recommendation is as noted for their appointment from the 1st of August 2023 to the 31st of July 2027.
Thank you. Any questions or clarification? Someone like to move a motion? Councillor Scales.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor Scales. A seconder? Councillor Wortman. Councillor Scales, would you like to speak to that at all? Councillor Wortman.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yeah, look, I agree totally with the officer's comments. High quality applicants, and definitely would like to thank the outgoing audit committee members. Did a great job. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wortman. Anyone else like to speak to that motion? I'd probably add to that the candidates we interviewed 6, and they were all very strong candidates, and the 2 we've appointed exceptional. So looking forward to the next 4 years. I'll put the motion. Anyone opposed? All in favour? Carried. Action sheet reports. We could probably take those as read. Is there any questions or clarification on those? Would someone like to move motion? Councillor Wortman.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that the report be noted.
Thanks, Councillor Wortman. A seconder? Councillor Anderson. Like to speak to that at all? Councillor Anderson. Anyone else like to speak to that motion? We'll put the motion. Anyone opposed? All in favour? Carried. 9.5, Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Councillor allowances. And I'll call on our Director of Corporate and Organisational Development.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the report today covers the allowances payable to the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor and the Councillors from 1 July 2023. So the recent tribunal, recently the tribunal made an adjustment to increase the base rates to 2% effective from the 1st of July to the 17th of December 2023. And a further 2% increase to base allowances has also been applied to future periods commencing from the 18th of December 2023. The recommendation is noted in the report that our councillor allowances and our remote area travel allowances are adjusted to take into account that 2% increase.
Thank you.
And that is backdated for the allowances from the 1st of July 2023.
Any questions or clarifications on that report? Councillor Scales.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Sorry, I just read in the summary part there. So we had an increase of 1.5% in December. There's another increase that's come through now. But then the last line in the summary, a further 2% increase to base allowances has also been applied to future periods, commencing from 18th of December 2023. Does that mean it's every 6 months that this is going to increase by 2%? Is that what the future periods are, or is it 12 monthly?
So, through you, Mr Mayor, there was a 1.5% increase in December, a 2% increase. So over the course of the 12 months, it is a 3.5% increase. The 2% increase from the 18th of December is to maintain the current 2% increase that we're voting on today.
Per annum.
Does that make sense? Does that clarify it for you? So it's not building in a 2% increase as of the 18th of December. It's saying that it continues on from the 18th of December because it's documented in 6 monthly blocks, if that makes sense.
Yes. So that's what I was asking.
Yes.
Yeah. Was it 6 monthly blocks? Yeah. Sorry,
Yes.
I probably didn't articulate that very clearly.
Okay.
Any further questions or clarification? Would someone like to move a motion? Councillor Wortman.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation as presented.
Thanks, Councillor Wortman. A seconder? Thanks, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Wortman, would you like to speak to that at all? Councillor Anderson? Anyone else like to speak to that? Councillor Scales?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. It's generally me talking against increases to our allowances, and it's not that I don't think we deserve them, because it's a fairly minimal amount that our allowance actually is. It's more the impact that it does have on the ratepayer, with them increasing all of the time. However, as I said, it's a fairly small amount that we are actually paid for the hours that we do put in. Obviously, we do this for the community, not for the income. I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks, Councillor Scales. Anyone else? I'd like to add in there that, you know, the changes have now made it so it's not something that council decides really. It's set that this is the increase, and we're just approving that. So it takes that burden, I think, away from council, the councillors, which I think is a good outcome. If there's no further comment, we'll put the motion. Anyone opposed? All in favour? Carried. Bushfire relief and recovery, our recovery update, and I'll call on our Deputy Director of Community. I'll call on our Director of Community and Planning. Our Deputy Director did the report.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Glad to hear I haven't got a demotion.
Yes.
This report is a report that is produced every 6 months, and just provide an update on the activities of the Relief and Recovery team. And just wanted to start by thanking the ongoing support from the state government for funding that team, as well as some of the other activities that are contained in the report. I will take the report as read, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that are particularly special. First, once again, we're really looking forward to supporting the Corryong Spirit event that celebrates particularly young people's lives and reflecting on those that we've lost in August. Also, some of the planning that's underway for the Blokes' Day and the Women's Weekend that are coming up in September, October. And last but not least, the really great proactive work that the team has done around the Skate Park project. Particularly in school, we've had a phenomenal response from young people, which has really been supported by the recovery team. So a big thanks to them and the comms team for supporting that process. And last but not least, also just wanted to also thank them for really, I guess, doing a bit of a pivot and helping with the flood recovery period, support over the time period with which this report was covering. So the recommendation is the report be noted.
Thank you. Any questions or clarification on the report, councillors? Would someone like to move a motion?
Excuse me, Mr Mayor, I do have a question.
Yes, Councillor Dick Shea.
I'm interested to know if the hours of operation of the hub at Corryong seem to be meeting the community needs.
Thanks, Councillor Dick Shea.
Through you, Mr Mayor, so we have a range of ways to probably test that. First is there's a recovery email in our 1-800 number that is still functional, I guess, if you like, normal council hours, 5 days a week. And then the 2 days that it's open, we monitor that in terms of walk-ins. I'd say, generally speaking, definitely is meeting the needs. But if there was ever a call for us to expand that, we could do that or change hours and days. And they are by appointment, so there's additional, outside of those operating days, there's an appointment opportunity as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? We've done that, yes. Who will speak to that? Who moved that? put the, can someone move the motion then? Thanks. Councillor Dickshaw, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that the report be noted.
Thanks, Councillor Dickshaw. A seconder? Councillor Scales. Yeah, Councillor Dickshaw, would you like to speak to that at all?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Scales.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to note that in the financial viability section there, that the Recovery Team and Associated Services are supported by Bushfire Recovery Victoria funding until 30th of June 2025. So that is a great outcome, and we do need to thank, well, it's not Bushfire Recovery anymore, is it? It's Emergency Recovery Victoria, for the continued funding through to 2025. As we know, you don't recover from such a disaster in 1, 2 or 3 years just by throwing bucket loads of money at us, and that this recovery effort will continue past 2025, and that this council will be supportive of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Scales. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? We'll put the motion. Anyone opposed? All in favour? Carried. Community and Wellbeing. 11.1 is LGBTIQA+ support framework report, and I'll call on our Director of Community and Planning.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report is a follow-up from the 26th of April meeting regarding particularly some of the activities that we undertake to ensure our communities are inclusive for all, and particularly for the I'll just spell it out for the purposes of anyone, because I know it wasn't written in the report, but anyone who may identify as being lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, intersex, queer or asexual plus. Just by way of recap, we did celebrate the Ida Hobbit, which is the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia on the 17th of May, and it was a really great event to see both at the Tallangatta and Corryong libraries. As part of that previous report, we did undertake to come back to Council with a proposed framework for a community committee of various forms. I suppose the unfortunate scenario is that the Pride Ball that is usually held in the northeast to celebrate people who identify as being LGBTIQA+, was cancelled, and that was mostly due to concerns about the safety of young people attending that ball. So I guess in response to that, we have consulted a range of other councils and other organisations that are part of the Rainbow Network, and it's our view that we think a slightly different approach really needs to be taken, and that's really to ensure that particularly young people, but other people who may have felt like they're a bit quietened by the threats that were made as part of, at the time that the ball was due to be held, that we actually do sort of a more proactive, perhaps softer approach to ensuring that we engage those people and hear from them before we can consider moving forward with a formalised committee. And it may be that we choose that the mechanism for that might not be best being a formalised committee. To reflect that, what we are proposing is really the engagement of a specialist consultant to really help work with us, and that will be someone who obviously identifies as LGBTIQA+, and it has a good rapport, particularly with young people, just to ensure that those people feel really supported through the process. So the recommendation is as presented.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions or clarification? Would someone like to move a motion? Councillor Dickshaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that Council engages the short-term services of a specialist youth community officer with demonstrated experience in LGBTIQA+ matters to advise councillors, executive and staff on the most appropriate ways to engage with the local LGBTIQA+ community members and the broader community to safely support safety, education and awareness, that our engagement and ongoing communications with the LGBTIQA+ community members and the broader community be developed and undertaken with other community organisations and stakeholders, for example schools, health services staff, and the establishment of a formal LGBTIQA+ advisory group only proceed if it is considered to be the best possible option, and that an agreed action plan be adopted and implemented.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Anderson. Councillor Dixay, would you like to speak to that?
I just think it's an important step that we need to take for the safety of some members of our community.
Councillor Anderson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Same as Councillor Dixay, it's very important and to show our inclusion of all our residents. And thank you very much for all the work that you've done.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. Would anyone else like to speak to that? We'll put the motion. Anyone opposed? All in favour? Carried. Uh, 11.2, Memorandum of Understanding between Town and Shire Council with the Walwa Relief Centre and the Border Walwa Football Netball Club Social Group Incorporated. We'll take that as read. Councillor Wortman.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I would like to move that this item is deferred to a workshop.
Thanks, Councillor Wortman. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Anderson. Councillor Wortman, would you like to speak to that at all? Councillor Anderson?
No, thank you.
Anyone else like to speak to that? We'll put the motion. Anyone opposed? All in favour? Carried. Twelve point is asset management. 12.1 asset management report is presented quarterly and is scheduled to be presented at the August meeting. Land use planning, 13.1, the land use planning report is presented quarterly and is scheduled to be presented at the September meeting. 14, environmental sustainability, and 14.1 is our environmental sustainability report, and I'll call on our Director of Infrastructure and Environment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Purpose of this report is to provide a quarterly update on environmental sustainability activities from March to June 2023, and also to provide an update on the introduction of the Victorian Container Deposit Scheme, which is being delivered by the state. The recommendation is as presented, that the report be noted, but just the container deposit scheme has been a long time coming and we're really looking forward to its introduction, hopefully in November.
Any questions or clarification on that report, councillors? Councillor Wortman.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I read in the report submissions are currently being sought from local businesses and community groups who may wish to establish over-the-counter collection points for the container deposit scheme. I know it's early days. Have we had any submissions?
The submissions would go straight to Visy, who are the appointed provider to the state. Yeah. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions or clarification? Probably got one question on that one, and under the same line. you know, we were hopeful that possibly we would get a hole in the wall that we put our bottles through, and instead it looks as if we're going to get an over-the-counter service. Is there any possibility that we may be able to get the container deposit scheme looked at and actually have the system where you feed the bottles through, or the containers through the wall?
We've provided feedback to the company that's to Visi. We haven't had a response, and they're looking into what they can provide for us. I suspect there will be other councils across Victoria providing similar feedback, and hopefully together we'll be able to advocate for a hole in the wall, essentially. Yeah.
Any further questions or clarification? Councillor Warman.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, again on this same topic. The container deposit scheme, it's 10 cents per container, but the community groups, they only get a portion of that.
That's correct.
Yeah, right.
And I can take that on notice. I haven't got the information on what that proportion is.
Yeah. Look, the only thing I'll say, it's got to be reasonably generous to make it worthwhile for a community group to take it on. Yeah.
If there's no further questions or clarification, would someone like to move a motion? Councillor Wortman.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that the report be noted.
Thanks, Councillor Wortman. A seconder. Councillor Scales. Councillor Wortman, Councillor Scales.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'll follow on from the theme that was set there in questions. The container deposit scheme, I'm actually going to use this as an opportunity to have a bit of a go at the state government. I think it's extremely disappointing that rural and regional communities are being treated this way, as just another example of them not really even understanding how rural and regional communities operate, how we work, the distances and the tyranny of the travel that we've got to do, and expecting community groups to deliver their fantastic scheme, or the best one in Australia. I'm sorry, it's really disappointing.
Thanks, Councillor Scales. Anyone else like to speak to the motion? Thank you. Well, we'll put the motion. Anyone opposed? All in favour? Carried. (15) Economic and Tourism Development. 15.1 Swimming Pool Report, Season 22-23. And I'll call on our Director of Community and Planning.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report is an annual report that we provide just to provide some sort of reflective opportunity around the swimming pool operations, and that's both to reflect obviously the importance of the pools that we know from a social perspective provide a great outlet for a whole range of things, not just recreation, social, various other things. But also to ensure that we're continuously getting the best value for money, because it does require a significant contribution for council to keep them open. Pleased to report that this year there were actually very minimal closures associated with both the pools, and they were pretty much all to do with the weather, which is fantastic, and not to do with staffing, which is quite a stark contrast to our neighbours who've had a range of staffing issues. And I think it really proves as well that council's really a solid operator of the pools as they stand, and that they're really loved by the community. Notwithstanding that, we do have an ongoing resolution through council to continuously test the market to make sure that we are providing value for money, so we are working on doing that. That doesn't necessarily mean that we will go for an outsourced model, but it does mean that we go through the process of always testing to see if we can get a better value for money opportunity. This season we did receive some feedback, particularly from some of our older residents and also residents with children and tourists that having an opportunity to open earlier in the day would be really well received. And we've looked at the data that around visitation, and we think that there is an opportunity to trial some slightly different hours from our normal arrangements, which are form part of the recommendation around potentially opening the pool a week later than normal, which is traditionally a time of year where we have very low attendance rates or visitation rates. And that's not to say that the swimming clubs can't access the pool during that time. We'll still open it normally for them. But for all of the other visitors, that we would actually open a week later, and in lieu of opening a week later, that we actually trial a morning swim session for that really peak period between the 20th of December and 7th of January. So you'll see from the recommendation that we're proposing that that forms a trial and that we come back with some reporting. So the recommendation is as presented.
Thank you. Any questions or clarification? I have one, just look in the recommendation there, and that officers investigate the capital costs of making the Corrigan swimming pool more accessible. Can you give us a brief idea of what that looks like?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have any preliminary costs at this point in time, but specifically there's two groups that we're keen to cater better for, particularly those with disabilities, either wheelchair or quite significant mobility issues, that the actual existing space that they can use is not great. And the other group is actually for those who identify as being LGBTQIA+, and that's particularly in line with the legislation that's been passed around gender diversity and ensuring that people feel as though they have a safe place to go to for in terms of a change room. So that's specifically what they'd be targeting.
Thank you. If there's no further questions or clarification, would someone like to move a motion? Councillor Dickshay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move those 3 points that are contained in the report. I'd like to add a fourth, if I may, which is that staff be thanked for their outstanding efforts in operating the pools last summer.
Thanks, Councillor Dickshay. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Wortman. Councillor Dickshay, would you like to speak to that at all?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad that we're proposing to try some different opening hours next year. We do get a lot of feedback each year from members of the community, and within the constraints that we have as an organisation, I think we're doing the best to listen to as many of those concerns as possible, and I hope that the members of the community support the trial period and continue to engage with staff if there's concerns about what doesn't work for them.
Thanks, Councillor Dickshay. Councillor Wortman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, look, I totally agree with Councillor Dickshay's comments, and I'd like to just refer back to the officers' comments too about our staff keeping the pools open at all times last year, and it was a great effort because we know how hard it is to access lifeguards, and it was a mighty effort. So, thank you.
Anyone else like to speak to that? Councillor Scales.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and to your surprise, I'm actually in favour of the motion. As we know, I'm generally an advocate against increasing expenditure on our swimming pools. They cost a lot of money every year. Look, our communities deserve a 24/7 heated swimming pool, but we cannot deliver that. and that's just the unfortunate truth of it. They come at a cost. I'd like to congratulate the staff on just doing a bit of moulding of opening hours, etc., so that by expanding the hours, it's not coming at a significant cost or increased cost this time around. So yes, I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Scales. If there's nothing further, we'll put the motion. Anyone opposed? All in favour? Carried. 16's councillor reports. There's nil. Urgent business, nil. 18 is committee minutes. So 18.1 is audit and risk committee meeting minutes from the 16th of June. Just take them as read. Any questions or clarification on those minutes? Someone like to move a motion? Councillor Anderson.
I'd like to move the recommendation as presented, please.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Scales. Anything to add to those?
No, thank you,
Councillor
Mr.
Scales. Anyone else like to speak to that? We'll put the motion. Anyone opposed? All in favour? Carried. Uh, 19's council policies. 19.1 policies for review and adoption. There are no policies for review or adoption this month. 20 is sealing of documents. 20.1 section 173 agreement AK and JC Stern, Langata Estate Proprietary Limited and RB Pickering. CM Marsh and Towing Shire Council. I'll call in our Director of Community and Planning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is to seek approval to remove a Section 173 agreement on land at the end of Towing Street, east on East Langata, and it's formerly known as Lot 1 PS 733729. Just by way of summary, the lot is proposed for development and we approved development plan a number of months ago. At this stage, the Section 173 provides for access to that site, to an area on the block that has actually never been used as an access way. And so the applicant has requested removal of that, and that also crosses into the neighbouring site, hence why all three are included. Sorry, hence why council and the other two property owners are included in the 173 agreement. At this stage, the expectation is that the permit will include a mandatory requirement that the neighbour has continued uninterrupted access throughout development, as well as ultimately the road that they've agreed that they'll access when the development is built, so that there's no point in time where they cannot access their property. Under the legislation, you are required to assess that the purpose of the agreement, in removing it, that the purpose of the agreement can still be met in some capacity, why the agreement is no longer required, and whether the ending of the agreement would disadvantage any person or breach any other legislation. So as the report details, we can confirm that we do believe that the conditions can absolutely be met with an alternative access way, and that there are no persons at a disadvantage or any other legislations being breached as a result of ending this Section 173 agreement. So the recommendation is as presented.
Thank you very much. Any questions or clarification? Councillor Wortman.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And look, the office may not be able to answer this question, but that access, I believe North East Water access that to get to their pump station. Were they a party to it, or was that just?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I might have to take on notice, but I know my understanding is that they have a separate access that they will be delivering as part of the development.
Fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
but the details of which I can't
No,
provide.
that's fine, that's fine.
Any further questions or clarification? Would someone like to move the motion? Councillor Dickshay.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation as presented.
Thanks, Councillor Dickshay. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wortman. Councillor Dickshay, would you like to speak to that at all?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Wortman. Anyone else like to speak to that? Councillor Scales.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I would just like to say that this is just another step along the way to what is going to be a very, very exciting project for Toolangatta. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Scales. There's nothing further. We'll put the motion. Anyone opposed? All in favour? Carried. 21's confidential. We have a recommendation that the meeting be closed to the press and public to consider information considered confidential under section 3(1) of the Local Government Act 2020, and council business information being information that would prejudice the council's position in commercial negotiations if permanently released. Someone like to move a motion to move the meeting to be closed to the press? And Councillor Dickshay.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that we go into confidential arrangements for the next part of the council meeting.
Thanks, Councillor Dickshay. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Anderson. Anyone opposed? All in favour? Carried. Thank you very much. That brings our meeting to an end, and thank you for your attendance today.